Okay, 10. So today I'm going to do a lesson on poetry. I'm going to try and do it this way rather than giving you all the resources through Google Classroom. So doing a kind of video lesson. So hopefully it'll take not too long to get through, and there'll be some questions at the end for you to answer via Google Classroom, or you can email me your work. So first of all, let's read through the poem. This one is called Neutral Tones. It's by Thomas Hardy. We stood way upon that winter day, and the sun was white as though chidden of God. A few leaves lay on the starving sod. They had fallen from an ash and were grey. Your eyes on me were as eyes that roved over tedious riddles of years ago, and some words played between us to and fro, on which lost the more by our love. The smile on your mouth was the deadest thing, alive enough to have strength to die, and a grin of bitterness swept thereby, like an ominous bird a wing. Since then, keen lessons that love deceives and rings with wrong have shaped to me your face and the God-cursed sun and a tree and a pond edged with greyish leaves. So the first thing to really know about this poem is a little bit about the writer Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy um, was a very famous writer, and he wrote this poem in around 1867, but it was published quite a while later in 1898. Now, with Thomas Hardy, his reputation as a writer is that a lot of his work is very pessimistic, really negative poetry and writing, and really bleak, so kind of hopeless and kind of heartbreaking stories and poems where there isn't really a happy ending for the characters or the people involved. It's just this kind of miserable existence that they just have to endure and get through. So really quite a negative writer who kind of doesn't really focus on positivity at all, but really focus on the negative sides of life. It's a bit grim, really. And this poem is exactly in that kind of frame of mind. It's about a couple who have been together, and this is the moment where they break up. And the writer has clearly kind of framed that in this poem as being the moment that kind of their relationship ended, and their love had already kind of faded, but this was the breaking point, and they split up at this in this poem, and they never see each other or never kind of be with each other again. The end of the poem is really kind of grim because the suggestion here that he feels that love has deceived him, and that from now on, for the rest of his life after this moment, his life has kind of never recovered. He's never felt that confidence with love again. He doesn't trust love anymore. So there's a sense that he's been miserable and unloved for many, many years since this breakup. So pretty grim poetry. Okay, so let's look at the first part of this poem, the title and the opening stanza. Straight away, we'll look at the title, Neutral Tones. Uh, the words neutral tones don't appear in the poem. They're kind of it's not a direct link to the actual text, but it does give a clue as to the way the poet is going to kind of develop. Neutral is a word that kind of means very kind of balanced. So if you're neutral in a conflict, so if it's like a war going on and you're neutral, you're not on either side. So if you're watching a sporting match event of, let's say, a football game, and you're neutral, you don't support either team. You're just watching it as a kind of an event. You don't really feel anything for the result. It's just kind of it's a spectacle, and you're a bystander rather than being a participant. So neutral means you're kind of on the sidelines. You're able to watch, but you're not really passionately involved. So the word neutral has a meaning of kind of being almost like anti-passion, or passionate, or passionless. Tones could be to do with sound, it could be to do with feeling, it could be to do with colour. It's suggesting that this poem is about passionate feelings. The idea that the passion has gone. So that's what the title kind of can be interpreted as being. It's a little bit of an enigma. It's not very clear, and it's kind of a bit numb, which I suppose suits the poem because that's kind of how the writer's feeling. The speaker in the poem uses a collective pronoun we to start us off, and that obviously brings the couple, the man and the woman in this poem, into a relationship. So we stood by upon that winter day. So as the poem progresses, you'll notice the pronouns change. It becomes less about we, it becomes more about you and I, or you and me, and that suggests that their relationship has deteriorated. They were together, but by the end of the poem, they are not. The setting that Thomas Hardy creates this poem is really quite symbolic. And by what I mean by that is there's two layers of meaning. You've got the kind of the literal meaning, they're by a pond, it's a kind of cold winter day. The sun's out, but it's not that kind of warm sun. It's that kind of winter sun that's really cold and quite blinding, so it's hard to see things. It's a very unpleasant setting, very cold. There's a lot of emphasis on kind of nature being dead. There's leaves on the ground, the trees bare, and the soil is starving, suggesting that there's no life going on. So we've got a very kind of vivid description of the setting, but it's very symbolic. Um, the choices of these kind of physical and natural details are really quite important. So a pond, for example, if you think about a pond, it's it's stagnant water. It's where water has kind of gathered and is just kind of stuck. It doesn't flow. Pond water has got no current. It doesn't move. It just stagnates, and it either will eventually dry up or it'll flood off somewhere else. So a pond is a really interesting image. It suggests, like their relationship, that they are going nowhere. The water is stuck and it's stinking and stagnating. It's probably all kind of full of slime and weeds and dead leaves and everything. It's not healthy flowing river water. It's not a beautiful stream. It's not a waterfall. It's stagnant, stinking water. So that's a very negative symbol indicating what their relationship is like. With it being winter, that's also symbolic because obviously winter is a time of coldness. It's a time when nature's kind of dead. And again, it suggests that there's no passion or warmth in this relationship. If it's a literal winter day, then it's going to be cold outside. And if it's metaphorical, then it's about the chilliness of their relationship. Chidden, if you chide something, it means it's been told off. So the sun is almost like being told off by God. It's being punished by God. So it's not a very nice sun. It's kind of it's weak. It's it's unhappy. It's not a very warm day at all. A few leaves lay, so they're not moving. So it kind of again makes them look like they're dead. And the sod, which is uh, an old-fashioned word for soil, is starving, so there's no life, or what life is there is soon to die. The tree where the leaves have come from is quite symbolic too. It's an ash tree, and if you think about ash, yes, it's a type of tree, but it's also what's left over from a fire when all the fuel's been burnt away and the fire's died out. So of all the trees that could have been included, the poet's gone for the one that has the kind of the link to the idea of fire going out, which obviously tells you about the relationship. The spark has gone, the fire's gone out, the love has ended. And grey, is there a more depressing colour than grey? I'm not sure that there is. So the opening stanza really kind of focuses the reader on the kind of the negative condition of this relationship. They are physically in a very unpleasant environment, which is symbolic of uh, their love that has faded and ended, and the coldness that has now set in between this couple. Okay, so let's look at stanza two now. Now, stanza two uh, draws the focus of the poet, the speaker of the poem, and the reader onto the other person in this relationship. So, just like we had we in the first stanza, that pronoun we, we've now got the pronoun your, and this is a possessive pronoun because we're now focusing on the eyes of the other person, the person who's not speaking in the poem. Your eyes on me were as eyes that rove. Now, the verb rove um, is if you're like a rover, like you go round and you you don't stay still, you don't settle, you're constantly moving. So what it's saying here is that as they're having this conversation, her eyes aren't looking at him. Her eyes are avoiding looking at his eyes, which indicates that she can't stand the sight of him, which is a very negative idea. So the speaker of this poem has picked up that the woman that he's been with no longer is able to stand the sight of him, and her eyes that rove, they do not look at him. They can't bear the sight of him, and they are looking at anything else they can rather than lingering on him. He imagines that the eyes, when she does look at him, she looks at him as if he is a tedious riddle. Now, tedious is a very negative word, means like really quite intensely boring, so like painfully boring. And a riddle is something that you can't work out. Years ago suggests that this has been a kind of puzzle, a riddle that started a long time ago. So the way I have always interpreted this line is that when she looks at him, what she sees is a kind of question that she can't work out. And that question, I think, is why did I get in this relationship with you in the first place? The riddle means that she doesn't understand what's going on, and tedious means it's boring and she doesn't really care anymore about even why she got with him. So she can't look at him, and when she does look at him, all she thinks is, why did I even start this relationship with you in the first place? So really, really negative. We've got in line 3 here, and some words play between us to and fro. Played is an interesting verb. It suggests light-hearted, not serious. It suggests that it's kind of doesn't mean anything, and that again links to the idea of their time now, that they don't mean anything to each other anymore, that they are just playing at being in a relationship rather than actually being in one, that their feelings have gone and all that's left is they're pretending to like each other. So they play, the words are just playing and they don't mean anything. And when they do talk, and what they're talking about is basically they're saying who in the relationship has come out worst. You know, which one of them has lost the more by being in love with the other person. So it's quite a negative conversation that they're having, arguing about, you know, who's come out of this relationship in a worse situation, who's been most damaged by being with the other person, which is a really, really negative conversation to have. So here we are in stanza 3. And in stanza 3, the kind of the attitude that the speaker has gets more personal, and the insults start to be thrown around a little bit. So the speaker focuses first on the smile on your mouth. Now, the smile that's that we all have, that we share with when we look at people and we smile at people, is meant to be a pleasant thing. It's meant to be something that's welcoming and friendly and nice. But in this situation, when the speaker sees the smile on his kind of the girlfriend or fiance or whatever the relationship is, when he sees a smile on her face, it's the deadest thing. So it's really negative, and he's insulting the way she smiles. And basically, all her smile can do is basically die. So really unpleasant, suggesting that, you know, almost like that there's no warmth or friendliness left at all in this relationship. It's a grin of bitterness. And that's a little bit of an oxymoron, because a grin is meant to be a happy thing, uh, a, a big smile, but bitterness is that horrible feeling, very negative emotion, a bitter taste in the mouth. So a real kind of oxymoron there of putting a happy thing with a very negative uh, description, suggesting that their relationship is confused and damaged and broken and can't be fixed. The simile at the end of this stanza, like an ominous bird of wing, he's suggesting here that the smile, the grin that's on his girlfriend's face, is like some kind of deadly kind of bird of prey, maybe some kind of crow or vulture, that's something that's going to come and attack him. So he doesn't trust the smile on her face. In fact, it makes him scared. He thinks that something bad's going to happen because she's smiling. So again, the relationship is in a very damaged situation and, and a very poor condition if when he sees her smile, he thinks something bad's going to happen. So yeah, a very, very negative uh, stanza here. And I think this is where the breakup happens. The first two stanzas have been setting the scene and kind of establishing the relationship. This stanza gets quite personal with the insults. So I think this is where the relationship actually breaks and they separate at this point. She walks away, he walks away, and all that's left is very bad feeling between the two of them um, as they go on with their lives without the other person. So the final stanza of Neutral Tones kind of it's got a time shift at the beginning of it. The phrase "since then" indicates that time has moved forward. That the first three stanzas have been a kind of flashback as the speaker has looked back at a moment in their life where something bad happened to them, and now the speaker's saying, what's happened since that moment, and the the word "keen" is used here, and keen means kind of painful and sharp. So, suggesting that what he's learnt since then has been quite a painful life lesson. And that lesson is that love deceives, that love lies, that love is not honest and it's not truthful. Which is a very negative, very pessimistic outlook on life. All love, according to this poem, is kind of lying to you. So a very negative outlook. And rings with wrong have shaped to me your face and the God-cursed sun. Rings with wrong is, as I hope fairly obviously, alliteration. The W's, the R sound here at the beginning of rings and wrong kind of echo each other. Um, Quite a negative sound, emphasizing the, the pain and the suffering that this relationship has caused him and the bad feeling he now has. All this negativity has shaped to him his memory of this occasion. So her face has been distorted by his negative feeling. The conditions on the day, the God-cursed sun, that very pale sunlight at the beginning, has been made even worse by his memory. The tree, the pond, and the leaves. That he kind of ends the poem by revisiting some of the ideas from the first stanza. And when a writer does that, when a writer uses the end of the poem to revisit something that's happened at the beginning of the poem, then there's obviously that in the structure, there's some kind of message that's trying to be given to the reader. And when a writer does that and goes back to the beginning or repeats some of the opening ideas at the end, it creates what's called a cyclical structure, like goes round in a circle. And the suggestion that I would take from this is that because he goes round in a circle and goes back to the beginning, it's like the speaker can't get over this loss, that his life is now stuck in this circle of going, trapped within this kind of miserable existence that he can't escape from, that this relationship, once it's over, has prevented him from having happiness ever again. So a really grim, bleak outlook at the end suggests being reinforced by this repetition of the negativity of the setting that was established right at the beginning. This poet is stuck at that moment. He can't get over that loss. He can't get over that sadness, and it's kind of ruined his life from that point on. He's never been able to trust love ever again. So it's really sad. So as I went through the poem with you a few minutes ago, I didn't talk about the rhyme pattern at all. The rhyme pattern in this one is an A B B A pattern, and it's really obvious, I think, um, throughout the poem that that's what the poet has kind of used. So the first stanza has day, God, sod, and grey as the ABBA pattern. Then we've got rove, ago, fro, and love. Not quite as close, but it's still an ABBA pattern. Then we have thing, die, thereby, and a wing. That's pretty much perfect. The final one, stanza 4, is deceives, me, tree, and leaves. So the ABBA pattern is a consistent feature of this poem, and it's used in every single stanza. So why is this poem using this particular pattern? ABBA, as you can look at it, has got a number of possible interpretations to it. So we'll start off with the idea of the two A's. The A could be the idea of being alone. So the two people in this poem, the couple, are separated. This poem is about them breaking up, and the rhyme pattern has the two A's far apart. That means that the B's have also got a symbolic meaning. The B's could mean them as a couple being together, but obviously not anymore. So you can interpret the rhyme pattern to have a meaning to do with this poem. The A's could be the two people now that they're single, they've separated, they've split up, and the B's represent the couple when they were together. So if you think about it, they started off separate, they get together, and they separate again. A, they're apart. B, they get together, and A, they split up again. The ABB pattern is basically could be interpreted as being a kind of representation of their relationship, how they started, how they got together, and how they ended. So here are the questions that I'm posting and asking for this poem. They're from the textbook that some of you got already from school. So first of all, do you think the narrator blames their lover for the end of their relationship? Why do you think that, or why don't you think that? So you decide whether you think yes, I blame the blame is being put on onto the lover or not, and then explain why. How is time used in this poem? Now I did talk about this a little bit in my analysis, so go back and look at the video again if you're not sure about that one. But how is time used in this poem? And 3, what do you think the title refers to? Why is it suitable for the poem? So now I hope you understand the poem a little bit more. I explain what the title means. Can you put the two together? Why is this title suitable for this poem? I'll also upload onto Google Classroom the a scan of this page so you can see the poem and the annotations and the notes from the revision guide in case you want that as well. But hopefully this video lesson has been useful, and let me know if you have got any questions using the comments in Google Classroom. Okay, Year 10, take care, and I'll see you next lesson. Bye now.